This is our first Responding to Domestic Violence virtual roundtable with the YWCA. And I can tell you it's not going to be the last one. There's a lot of issues we need to discuss and address, different age groups and different individuals. I'm here together with the YWCA Union County to elevate the issue of domestic violence and educate our neighbors about how to respond when you confront or suspect domestic violence is occurring. After watching the news, hearing about the recent Amber Alert, and thinking about the impact of COVID-19 on domestic violence, I decided to ask some friends about how would they respond if someone came to them and said that they were a victim of domestic violence. I was surprised that none of us really knew what to say or what to do other than to call YWCA to ask them. So I decided I had to do something to educate myself and my neighbors about how to respond to domestic violence. I called my friends at YWCA about the issue, and together we organized this community roundtable. With that, I'd like to introduce YWCA Director of Development, Jennifer Vriens, who brought together a panel of YWCA staff who are experts to help answer some basic questions about how to respond to domestic violence. Jennifer?
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. We greatly appreciate you holding this important forum this evening, especially in light of recent events in our county. It's my pleasure to introduce my YWCA colleagues this evening, serving as panelists. First, we have Adela Caceres, Assistant Executive Director for Core Services, and also Lisa Poris, Director of our Family Justice Center, and Lillian Ribeiro, Community Educator and Drama Therapist. Thank you all for being here this evening. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Assemblywoman, for some questions.
Okay, so let's start with the questions. If I think a friend or a family member is experiencing domestic violence, how can I help?
That's a great first question. And I love how you started the whole introduction by talking about what else do I do besides refer my friend to the YWCA. That is a great first instinct because so many of our cases are so unique with so many different needs. It's actually one of the best things you could do is to refer them to our 24-hour hotline. I know we're going to be posting our hotline number in the chat throughout this roundtable so that folks have that as a resource, because that's one of the best ways to be able to assess what's going on in the victim's life and really be able to figure out how to best assist that woman or man or whoever it may be that is in need of services.
Lisa, just one question within the question, sorry.
Sure.
Now that 24-hour hotline is confidential, right?
Yes, absolutely confidential, and it's 24 hours.
And then to add to that, I mean, I think also the first thing would be also just to listen. You know, if a family member or a friend comes to you and discloses something like that, listen and try to listen non-judgmentally. You know, be there for that person because it takes a lot of courage even just to disclose something like that. So I think definitely I think that would be the first way to help someone is to listen attentively, non-judgmentally, and then certainly take the next step and hopefully refer them to us or even the state domestic violence hotline.
When they call you or the hotline, what do you ask the individual? I know some individuals are concerned about giving their name because they're afraid someone's going to call their house or show up at their door, and that would just make the problem worse. So when someone calls, what does someone generally talk to them about?
So if I could just start, so when someone calls our hotline, well, number one, they don't have to give us their name. They don't have to give us any identifying information. They can remain anonymous. So that is their choice. And And then again, what we do too is we listen. We try to hear the victims, the survivor's story and hear what's happening. And through that conversation, try to assess what's happening with that individual and in their particular domestic violence situation. Because just like Lisa said, every situation is different. There's different levels of severity. So in that conversation, we try to figure out what's going on. We try to figure out and assess really what are the needs of that individual at that moment. And then depending on what the needs are, and it could be something, maybe they're reaching out, maybe because they're just seeking counseling. They want to just continue to, to talk about what's happening in their situation. Maybe they're not ready to leave. Maybe through our conversation, we learn that it's maybe not safe for them to leave, because that happens a lot too. Through our conversation and through the details that they share about the power and control that the abuser demonstrates and executes in their relationship, we determine that maybe it isn't exactly the safest time to leave. So then we're maybe even thinking about doing some safety planning with them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Well, I have a question. What is safety planning?
We can talk about safety planning right now. We definitely, the three of us kind of talked beforehand and talked about different things that we thought would come up this evening. We're like, we have to make sure that we cover safety planning, I think, which is why Adela kind of indicated that we'd probably talk about it later, but we can definitely jump into safety planning now. Lillian, do you want to have a chance to?
Yeah, I was going to share that, just as Lisa and Adela share that with each person, their experience is very unique. And so a safety plan, we not only conduct a safety plan for adults, but we also do safety plans with children. As I work in the PALS program, and we service children ages 3 and up. And so these safety plans are really tailored to where that person is at the point in their relationship. They might be in the abusive relationship. They might have left the abuser. They might be doing visitation where the children are visiting with the abuser. So it's really about learning what's going on. A safety plan, a basic safety plan might be to let friends and family know what's going on. Inform the schools or after school activities or any sports or any activities or places that the children are going, that there is a situation going on with the abuser, so that they know in the case that the abuser is not allowed to pick up the children, that they know it's not safe for a child to go with that person, even though it might be the parent. A safety plan might involve getting a restraining order, a temporary restraining order involving the police, possibly going to a shelter if that person's life is in danger, or possibly just getting a couple items ready in a flea bag in case they have to leave the house immediately, with important documents, items that are important to the children, that person, a couple of basic needs for them to take with them. Technology safety planning is also very important. Learning about possibly if the phone might be being tracked, social media, email accounts, making sure that friends and family know like code words, and the children too at home. Children, like when the code word that helps identify to friends and family, like I'm in trouble, I need help, call the police. That code word might also be used with a child so that they know to hide or go to a safe place or call a neighbor and get a neighbor involved. So we go through extensive safety planning almost each time we meet with a client. In my work in drama therapy, I'm doing safety planning almost every time I have a session. It might just even be in play, like who do you call for help? Like we're doing like some role play activity, dramatized like book storytelling, and helping like that child even make choices for themselves, and like learning about what's safe, what's not safe. And I think that's important too, right? Sometimes people might not know how much danger they're in. and that's a big part of our work as well. Sometimes living with abuse, we do not see the signs that are escalating within the relationship that can cause lethality. And in our work as experts, we know what those signs are. And so we can help work with a client to really identify, or someone in the community, like, you may not be safe right now. Where are safe places you can go? And talking about options, right? Because the most important thing is we want to empower the clients that we work with and make them feel safer, and to be able to make choices for themselves to get the help they need or to get out quickly. And as Adela mentioned, for everyone, leaving might not be safe. Safety might mean planning out the right moment to leave, or working towards that moment of leaving. So it does look differently for everyone. And we always say, well, at least I do, people know their abusers the best.
Yes.
And so we work with that individual to really figure out what is the best safety plan, right? Changing the locks, security systems, address change, name change, relocation, school change, changing the community involvement. There are layers and layers and layers that we kind of explore with people in terms of what kind of safety levels they need.
Wow, that's so much to think about. I guess one of my concerns is once you disclose to someone, you really have opened up the issue. And how do you know for sure that that person doesn't blab? You know what I mean? And it reminds me of a woman who had decided she was going to leave her husband and quietly change the address, the home address, only to have the mailman ask the husband like 2 days later, "Oh, I thought you were all moving together." And so I guess I'm concerned about once you say something to someone, you have just opened up the situation and it could get worse. So let's go on with,
Although Assemblywoman, before you
Yeah.
move on from that, to follow up with that. So one of the things that that does come up sometimes is the mail issue, and what do people do and when they are relocating. So when we're safety planning with the victim, rather than telling that person to change the address with the post office, we might suggest they get a PO box that's explicitly for them, and only certain things are being sent there while other things are continuing to go. That would be part of our safety planning process, is to plan around that. But you're absolutely right. You always have to be so careful and who it is you're starting to talk to.
Absolutely.
well, since a lot of us, when we get together, we are social beings and we don't really look at the warning signs of domestic violence. So are there some signs that we should be on a lookout for when we're talking with our friends or family members?
Just to piggyback off of what Lisa mentioned about even sharing just going back to that question, I also want to share, when we are sharing our situation with other people, there always is that risk, right, of disclosure to others who should not know information, especially when it comes to domestic violence. So in this community response, I would like to share that it is very important to be aware of who you share your information with. Even sometimes friends and family, it's important to keep, this process of leaving or moving or going privately between yourself and a counselor or the domestic violence agency that you're working with. And just those that you absolutely trust. Because as you mentioned, Assemblywoman, it can actually get out, and then that kind of it does sabotage or put that person in danger if their abuser finds out that they are making a plan to leave. And some of those, just continuing on to the warning signs, the warning signs often involve possessive behavior. I know we probably put a power and control wheel up in the chat, where we will share that with you all, and those are some of the warning signs. Anyone who's watching this right now, you can Google the power and control wheel to look up some of the warning signs of domestic violence. But warning signs are not just like physical abuse. It could be emotional, intimidation, using isolation, minimizing and denying blaming the other person that you're with, using one's male privilege, economic abuse. But some of the warning signs can just be as simple as that person being upset that you're spending time with your friends that you haven't seen in a long time, or getting back on a workout routine, or changing a pattern that possibly that person has had in a shift. There's a change, could be a baby on the way, a job change, and the partner becomes very upset or angry. Often they're possessive or jealous, threatening to hurt the other person, threatening to leave, hurt themselves, becoming very angry, and then blaming their partner are just a few of the warning signs that show that that person may have abusive tendencies. I don't know if Adela or Lisa, you would like to add anything to that.
I was just going to add, as the friend or family member who might be concerned and looking for those warning signs, you might realize that this person is no longer attending family events or responding at the very last minute or canceling at the last minute. There might be changes in terms of, the interactions that you're having with that person, the frequency of those interactions. That can be, a really good indication that something is going on, and can be, one of those more detectable warning signs and symbol of maybe the isolation that might be going on. Adela, you look like you were going to add something.
Yeah, you took a little bit of mine, was what I was going to add. The other thing too, it just popped in my head that I don't know if we mentioned it before, but regarding leaving, one of the probably the most dangerous time for a victim is when they leave the abuser. That's probably one of the most dangerous times, and that's something really important, I think, for all of us to just be aware of, because as I mentioned in the beginning, the general public, and I've heard people say this, victims have said it to us coming to the agency, my friends, my family don't understand. They just tell me, just leave, right? But they don't fully understand what that person is living. And like Lillian said before, they're the expert. They know their abuser best out of everybody. So it could be, by us just telling them, oh, we'll just leave, or us thinking that we know, what is the best course of action for them, we may be putting them in danger. So just something else I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, as friends and family, it's really important to tell the person that is sharing this with you, or you suspect that might be in an abusive relationship, to let them know, like, hey, you deserve better. You shouldn't be being treated like this. Just because this person is your wife or your husband, they shouldn't talk to you that way. You deserve to be treated with respect. Love shouldn't hurt. So even words of encouragement to help that person see that you notice and that they deserve more, reminding them that you will be there alongside of them at any time, and asking how you as a friend or family can be of help. Of course, with being aware of your safety as well, that we can talk about, because sometimes in cases or just working with victims, it's really important to be supportive, but also not put yourself in danger as well. And that's why it is important to share information, resources like us, our hotline or our website number, so that we as experts can work with people in the community to help them find somewhere safe and not put anyone else, a friend or a family, in danger as well. Because as Adela mentioned, when a person leaves, it can be dangerous not only for that individual, but for friends and family as well. So it is important to support someone. It can take them a couple times to leave, many times before they're ready to make that break. And so it's important not to lose confidence and not be like, oh, again, like you're back with that person. Like I knew you'd go back. I don't even want to hear it. You know, one of the major things is isolation that an abuser causes. As like Lisa mentioned before, you notice maybe the abuser is not coming to family events anymore, or events that involve both partners. And if you further cause isolation to your friend or family member, it just makes them harder to leave. You want to invite them more, you want to encourage them, you want to be a part of their life as much as you can in a way that's safe for everyone.
But during COVID-19, where there's less family events or any events, and we're all at home, has it escalated domestic violence?
Yes, it has. I don't know if anyone wants to speak on any statistics, but it definitely has escalated. It's just more difficult for people to get help because they're at home. They're at home with their abuser.
It's been, if I may add, it's been a very difficult time for abusers for victims rather, during COVID. And when we were in true lockdown in the very beginning, our hotline numbers actually went down because people could not reach out for help. And when things began to reopen and they were more free to make a phone call, our hotline just blew up and people calling us for help. So it's been very difficult for survivors. And actually, one of our community partners for Women in Justice, did a wonderful study on the impact of COVID on victims, and it's on their website, and it's staggering, absolutely. And not only the abuse got worse, the existing abuse intensified as well. So.
Well, I would think there was such a number of people who lost their jobs, those that were essential workers who had to go, but then got sick because they didn't have the needed PPEs. I always forget that. But I guess I'm just so concerned that those victims were silenced because of COVID-19. When we were closed, we are now opening up more, but then, we have all this discussions of different variants coming. So I'm not sure. And, with the mask, you really can't see things. You can't see bruises. It was just a concern. So for the victims, what resources are available through your agency?
So we are open, operating virtually. I wanted to add, even during COVID-19, and we have been working with children virtually. I know counseling is being provided virtually as well. Resources, so our counseling programs are functioning, the legal, which the Family Justice Center, Lisa could speak a little bit more about, but specifically for the PALS program and community education, which is the area that I work in, people, partnering organizations in the community reach out to me to schedule events where I can come in and do prevention work, education. I've been doing high school healthy relationship trainings, virtually doing trainings for Trinitas, working with law enforcement, younger populations, as well as providing therapy virtually to children ages 3 and up. So if anyone listening to our panel today works within the community or has connections to PTA or a high school or any organizations that you think it's very important to have like an educational program for prevention work and for people in the community to learn more about our agency and the free services that we provide, which it's not because I work here, but we do really great work in the community. And it's important for people to know about the services that we provide. We're like a one-stop shop. We provide legal, counseling, support for families, our STEP program, Skill Step Empowerment program. We also have our shelter. So we really support our families. And if whatever people who are in abusive situations trying to, live a life safely, with their families or just them as individuals themselves. But if we, for whatever reason, our services are not enough, like if we are working with people's who may be undocumented or might need other services within the community or like rental assistance, whatever it is, we do make outside referrals. We work very closely with the partnering organizations in Union County and in the state. So that's a little bit on our end, my end with community ed and PALS.
And all our services have been operating throughout the pandemic. And we just switched over to virtual services for counseling, court advocacy, case management, the FJC by phone as well. And our shelter is functioning. So we do have while those services were virtual, our shelter has been operating. So we're here.
And as Lillian was talking about, I'd like to talk for a moment about the Family Justice Center. Lillian was talking about the YWCA as a one-stop shop where we have so many things available to help victims. At the Family Justice Center, we literally are a one-stop shop where when we are open, we have multiple agencies housed in one location. So we have staff from YWCA, of course, but also from Proceed and for Partners for Women in Justice, now just named Partners, and Central Jersey Legal Services. We work so closely with the prosecutor's office, so victims are able to come and get all of the services they need, all literally under one roof. During COVID, this is happening virtually where it's all under one roof, but we have such close relationships that we're seamlessly providing the connections that the victims need to these other services if they need an attorney, if they need a counselor, if they need substance abuse, whatever the support is that they might need. At the Family Justice Center, we're physically located attached to the family courthouse. So that gives an indication of the kind of focus of the work that we're doing. So we work with victims who are coming in, who are filing for restraining orders. We're holding them their hands through the process, talking to them about what they need to include in restraining orders, who qualifies for restraining orders, telling them what to expect at their hearings. We're zooming into breakout rooms on Zoom to talk to victims as they're going into their hearings, to talk to them about what a dismissal process looks like, because unfortunately many of the women or men that we talk to are looking to dismiss their restraining orders for various reasons, but we're safety planning with them. And so we're really working with them every step of the way and then connecting with them and connecting them to services, whether it's within the YWCA or with our partners that, as I said, are physically under one roof at the Family Justice Center. And we've been doing, as Jennifer said, we've been doing this throughout the pandemic where we've been providing them with this support. And then Adela, I don't know if you want to talk more about the shelter and residential services that we do offer.
Can I just ask one question, Adela?
Sure.
Lisa, I just need to step back. Can you explain, just because I want to make sure we get basic information out, what is a restraining order?
Yep.
And is it actually helpful?
I had a feeling that's where you were going to go with that.
How does a person go about filing a restraining order?
So I can talk for the next 2 hours to answer all of those questions. And I know we are time limited, but very briefly, a restraining order is, it's literally a court order to prohibit violence from one party to another party. It's a civil order, it's not criminal, and it's tended to look at protecting folks who may be in a dating relationship, intimate partner relationship. It could even be folks who are members of the same household. It's not something that you'd be getting against your boss unless you were in a relationship with your boss. But it is someone, it might be that a grandmother is getting it against an abusive grandchild for whatever reason. So it is many different relationships can get a restraining order if necessary, because abuse happens in so many different ways in different homes. And the restraining order literally will say that this person needs to stay away from this person. And if you're, someone with children, you can include that they need to stay away from your children or other family members. So you can list out who it is that needs to be protected within this order. And within the order, you can also be asking for additional information, whether it's custody of the children, whether it's financial support. The order will also make allowances for the person to come to the home with the police to be able to get whatever items they need safely from the home. When they first file for a restraining order, it's often helpful if they have previously gotten a police report because of the violence that may have happened, but it's not necessary. It's also not necessary for it to have been a physically abusive relationship. There's many different reasons why people get restraining orders. It might have been threats of abuse. It might have been, oh my gosh, so many different kinds of abuse. I know we didn't even cover really the basics of domestic violence in that sense. But Right now, what is happening is, typically someone is calling the court. They are right now allowing a few people in to go in person to file, but for the most part, it's being done primarily remotely, but the court is in the process of shifting things. I can't give details on that. I'm still working on learning all the details of what it's going to be, but the court is moving towards more in-person operations. But it's been happening remotely where people are coming. As I said, we're zooming into hearings. The court's holding hearings over Zoom where temporary restraining orders are granted. And then about a couple weeks later, there might be a hearing for a final restraining order. So initially you might be given this temporary protection. The defendant, the abuser, would be served with the papers, and then they have the chance to come to the final court hearing. For the final hearing, and both sides have an opportunity to present their side, and a final restraining order could be granted, and that lasts indefinitely. In New Jersey, there's no time limit on protective orders. Now, I know you had a second part to your question. I think you said, are they actually helpful?
Yeah.
I think it was Lillian earlier who talked about it, that our victims know their abusers better than anyone else. So in some situations, they're incredibly helpful. In some situations, it might be that it's more dangerous, and when the defendant is served with the papers could be an incredibly dangerous time and could make things worse potentially. So that's something that when we're talking to folks at the Family Justice Center on the hotline or whatever service they're receiving from the YWCA, we're going to talk to them about that and make sure that this is the right decision for them. It's not right for everybody. It is right for many people. The really important thing to know about restraining orders that I didn't mention is that they're enforceable. So if someone does violate that order, they have to be arrested. You call 911 and the police come out and they have to arrest that person for violating the order. And that's how they're most effective, is when you're regularly enforcing them. And when the defendant knows that the victim is going to be enforcing them, then that's really an important part of that piece too.
Okay. Adela, you were going.
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit about the restraining order. As a result, like Lisa said, that the victim can file remotely, and what that looks like is they can actually walk into the Superior Court Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, but they also can file over the phone. They have an English line and a Spanish line, and then if there are other languages, the victim can actually request for an interpreter over the phone. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you, Adela. It's an important piece of
That's
it.
great to know. And I forgot who mentioned it, someone mentioned that domestic violence isn't always physical. I think that's part of the problem for everyone to understand domestic violence, because they think it's just bruises. And then they're not sure how they can assist a family member if they're having a problem.
Right.
So,
I know you even had mentioned if someone's wearing a mask, you can't see a bruise, but there's so much more to the domestic violence dynamic than that. Lillian, do you want to take over on that one?
Well, I was just going to share that before, it's not always physical. And I usually say this in trainings when we're running the 40-hour training at our agency, that when it becomes physical, it actually is a significant point in the relationship that for us in assessment shows that it has become a dangerous relationship, because someone can get hurt, someone could get injured, someone can unfortunately lose their life. You know, when it becomes physical, it is a very dangerous for that person. There's multiple warning signs, as you asked us earlier, Assemblywoman, like what are the warning signs? All of these warning signs are playing out or showing themselves in a way that someone feels psychologically, emotionally, they're like intimidated. Sometimes it really could be like the smallest things. It can be, you didn't make my salad the right way, or you didn't get home at the right time. You know, I had someone who their partner used to track the mileage on their car. You know, and so you can imagine this person who would get in their car to go to the grocery market. They had to provide the receipt getting home, and they had to have the exact amount of mileage, or else there would be consequences, right? These power and control dynamics that happen are to instill fear. And that's what domestic violence is. It's a pattern of coercive behavior that intimidates the other partner in being fearful. So that person feels like they're walking on eggshells. They feel like the choices that they make might not be the right choice. They don't know if it's going to make the other person upset. And so usually in that power and control dynamics wheel that we showed before, which someone commented, by the way, in the chat, about an LGBTQ plus wheel. There are wheels, transgender wheels, LGBT plus. There are different types of power and control wheels. So please look up these wheels for anyone who's interested in learning more. But like an abusive person will use one tactic in this wheel and move to the next one, right? Where like slowly the consequences, if they become angry, maybe they'll isolate the person, they'll become angry at them, they won't go to an event with that person, maybe they're controlling the finances, the person has limited amount of money, maybe they sabotage. You know, this happens with a lot of young people that I work with. A person is applying to a school or studying for a very important test, and their abusive teenage partner keeps them up all night, you know, where they're tired and they can't like study for an exam. And none of that involves physical abuse, right? That's all emotional, psychological. But these are all, of course, tactics that are being used. And so when it becomes physical, it is showing that sign in the relationship that it's become like dangerous.
Lillian, I also just want to add about immigration, because so often we also see immigration and undocumented status being used as a form of manipulation and abuse as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, years back, we saw a tremendous amount of the numbers of our clients, our immigrant clients, drop in numbers in like receiving services, right? So an abusive person might be like, oh, I'm going to have you deported. If you call the cops on me, you're the one who's going to get locked up, you know, and that person might not even know their rights, their language barriers. They may be culturally how police used to treat people in their own community where they're from, they don't know if the police are safe, right? So it's really important that people know that we provide services in multiple languages, that we have a language hotline. And unfortunately, an abuser will make someone feel like there is no help out there, and their partner is going to not find anyone better than them, you know, and basically that they're, you know, they're with them forever, right? Like, so these like feelings of feeling trapped, a lot of times a victim doesn't know where to turn to. And so going back to that question of friends and family, it's really important for you to make your friend or family member feel like you're there to support them and listen. And sometimes, yes, it will take a while. And that's frustrating for family and friends because we don't like seeing someone we love being hurt. Sometimes we're seeing these dynamics play out within our own family members, right? Where it could be an uncle or a brother or a sister or a mother, you know, and it becomes complicated to call someone out on their behavior, and calling them out in the safest way possible, that your safety, of course, taking that in mind, but also making the sometimes, just to like also piggyback that sometimes an abuser may change, they, you know, based on like studies, may change the behavior if they see how it's impacting their children, right? So a lot of times, like they see the effects of the behaviors of a child, like in school, anxiety levels of a child, you know, they're like skyrocketing. A child feels nervous. A child is worried about the mother. A child is worried about the other parent. A child feels conflicted between what's going on with the parents. So it's important just to make people aware that there is, and I think someone also wrote this about in the chat, how children and pets are impacted. Absolutely. Many times you know, people might say, oh, the kids don't know. Yes, the kids do know. And kids need support in also processing some of what they've seen and heard, so that they can safely talk about their own feelings. So all of that is super, super important to know. And domestic violence is not physical. It's more than that. way more than that, not just physical.
All right, let me ask you something, because if you see something, should you say something to the abuser? And let me explain why I'm asking that. We had years ago a family trip, family and friends. And there was a couple that the husband, his interaction with his wife looked to me to be abusive. But everybody has a relationship, so I didn't want to misinterpret it. But as the days went on, it looked like it was a problem. So I asked my father to have a talk with the alleged abuser, because I'm not sure what we were seeing, but it wasn't comfortable. And so that's like, and I know everybody's different, so you can't always say something because you don't know how they're going to react to you. But this was, man to man. And for the rest of the trip, it settled down, but I never quite knew if there was a problem. So should you say something if you see something?
I think our silence is such a tricky question to answer.
It is, right? That's what I thought.
It is.
I guess it's a starting point. At least there might be a problem.
Right. I mean, it so much depends on every situation and everybody who's involved. Now, obviously, I don't know the family trip that you were on, and maybe it felt like man to man was going to be the right way of approaching it. But sometimes, if you can speak to the victim quietly on the side, in a safe way, and ask what's going on and listen. Lillian and Adela earlier were talking about the importance of really just being there and listening, and then from there making a decision about what to do based on what the victim wants. The victim might know that it could set someone off even more. We just, without knowing the dynamics of every relationship, sometimes it's best to really talk to the victim first when possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
Definitely separate and separate,
Yes.
not at the same
absolutely.
time. Yeah, not at the same time. Separate both parties, and see what's going on. Also, just kind of bringing it back to that isolation point, right? Maybe calling out that person might mean they won't come around next time there's a family friend
Yeah,
event.
that's true.
They might actually be behaving that way so that they're not invited back. And I've also been in situations, I work in this field. I've been in this field for over 10 years. And so also being out with some friends of mine in the past where a certain partner has acted a very specific, like borderline abusive behavior in front of me, knowing that I work in this field, and me saying something if I feel comfortable saying something in the moment based on the situation, or just speaking to both parties separately and kind of seeing what's going on. But also being aware that that might be a behavior that that person is doing intentionally, to see how the response around the other people are towards that person, or to further isolate that partner. Many times it's actually a tactic. So being aware, that's important to note as well while we're having this conversation.
Well, I could ask questions all night, but let's see if anyone that joined us has a question for any of the panelists.
And Assemblywoman, while we're waiting for
Go ahead.
questions, I just want to add that our website is a great resource of information. Everything we've talked about, warning signs, power and control, all of our services, how to reach us, our hotline, everything is on our website. So that's a great place to start. And it's www.ywcaunioncounty.org.
And Jennifer,
And-
just to piggyback from that, the Family Justice Center site,
Yes.
which you can get to through the YWCA site. I know someone has been posting some really detailed information about restraining orders in the chat. We also have a legal resource guide on our website. I don't know if it's on the YW's website too, or if it's just on the FJC's website.
It's on both. It's on both.
Which really goes through the whole process and really takes you through and gives a lot of those details about the full process of a restraining order and what to include and what to expect in the hearings.
What I wanted to add as well was that, the hotline, the Family Justice Center, those are both great entry points into the agency to receive all of the services that we've talked about. One that I didn't elaborate too much on before, I think we went in a different direction, is I just want to highlight a little bit about the shelter. So during COVID, post-COVID, we have remained open. Our hotline has remained open. Our Family Justice Center line has remained open. But shelter has remained open. We've been available to our victims. The other thing too is that as
you mean physically open, Adela?
Physically open, yes,
Physically open.
We've been abiding by COVID safety protocols to keep everyone safe. Everyone is wearing masks, they're distancing. We have specific schedules for the families so that there isn't too much interaction. So we've been keeping that in mind as we've been operating. And then the other thing too that I wanted to say is that, as we, take a hotline and if, let's say, a victim needs shelter, we assess, number one, if it's even safe to bring that individual into our shelter. If we see that maybe it's not safe, then we work very, very closely with the network of shelters around the state. And then, we may need to advocate out of county. There's been times that we've had to refer our victims out of state because it really just has not been safe for them to even remain in New Jersey. That's even happened at the Family Justice Center. The Family Justice Center has worked very closely with law enforcement, and we've been able to partner with them to get our victims from point A to point B. So that's the other thing that I wanted to mention about shelter, and that we work with a larger network, and and we're still here, and we're still going despite the challenges of COVID.
No, I've learned some really good tidbits from you, especially that the victim is the best expert on her abuser. Didn't think about that. And how the whole safety planning and how it could change, not always the same. It depends on what's going on in the family. And of course, your resources that I didn't even have a clue that you had so many resources for individuals. So do we have any questions?
And we would love to share our resources with more people in the community. I think one of the most difficult things for us, like at least for myself in serving people in our community and in the state, is that often victims don't know that there's free services being provided in the county that they live in. So it's so important that if anyone here on this call has connections, and I want to thank you, Assemblywoman, for putting this together today so that we can share the resources that we provide at our agency, because the first step to leaving safely is a friend or a family member saying, I know about the YWCA, just learned about this at the community roundtable with Assemblywoman Annette Quijano. And I know that you can call this free hotline. It's totally confidential. Call, let them know what's going on. Maybe they can help. You don't know. You don't want to make the call for that person. Just empower them by making those steps for themselves. Also remember never to give our hotline in front of the abuser. Don't
Yes.
say, I'm gonna give her or him the phone number to the domestic violence agency so they don't have to deal with how you act towards them anymore. You don't want to do that. That's some, on the side, you could just say, hey, just try to look up the website. It's YWCAunioncounty.org. If they're not in this county, there's other resources for other counties, like there's a national line that they can call. So that's the first step. The first step is kind of like planting that seed, them reading the warning signs on our website, them like knowing like, okay, I don't feel safe. I don't like that the kids at home are seeing this behavior anymore. I don't want to do this to my family. I don't want to do this to myself. I don't want to go through this. So it's a process, like I mentioned before, and you sharing the resource is definitely a first step. If they don't make that call or look us up right away, they might a year later. So just it's important for people to know what community resources exist. That's the first step to anyone getting out of the situation that they're in.
We have hotline cards that are the size of business cards, and we will send them to anyone that wants them, whether it's for your business, your house of worship, whatever you need it for. So, and we have lots of them. So if anybody wants a hotline card, they can just request them through our info@ email address, info@ywcaunioncounty.org, and we'd be happy to send them to you.
Jennifer, I'm going to ask you now, and we'll follow up, but we're going to have a table at the Elizabeth National Night Out. So I would like to have
Oh,
those
great.
there. I'm going to tell
sure.
you, I'm going to be a constant requester of supplies. Because as
Please.
I go out,
Our
welcome
pleasure.
there's a barrier where the individuals that need the information are not always getting the information.
Right.
And some people may not even have computers, so they can't Zoom.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure, and I'm going to take with me, I give you my word now, I will take with me these cards where I go, because I think it should just be something that I add. And if anybody picks it up, they can pick it up quietly. No one has to know what they're asking, that they're interested. And you're right, they might not call that same week. They might call a year later, but
That's
they
right.
have the card and they have the knowledge. And then that's how we empower our neighbors to make sure if they're in an abusive relationship, they know about your organization and about the great people that work there. So I'm so happy that I called Jennifer and I asked, can we do this? And you said, sure. And
I'm glad you did too.
It's something that I just feel that we're not getting the information to the people that need it. And so that we all have to work together. And, as the Assemblywoman, I'll do my part. And, everyone that watches this, if they would commit to just do their part too. If someone says something, if they're chosen to be the person that the victim says something to them, then that they actually have the information to be able to help the victim know about your organization. Because I think this one-stop shopping is a great service to the community, but we just have to make sure, and I do tend to think that the victims are more women than men, but if they're a woman or a man, that they know of your services and go. And if it's an undocumented individual where English is not their first language, and that they are being kept isolated because of their status, that they too know this. So we'll be sharing that with other groups as hopefully we open up a little more with COVID-19 restrictions and are able to share it with everyone. So thank you so much. We're almost actually to an hour. I wasn't sure we were going to fill the time. I don't know why, because each one of you could speak for hours on any of the topics. It's just a roundtable, quick roundtable, just to get the information out there. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and thank you for the work you do. It's so important to our community.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
letting us do this. We're happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having
Thank
us. Thank
you.
you for helping us spread the word, Assemblywoman. Thank you.
I can't wait until the building is up across the street. I don't like to see just the foundation.
We are
Soon.
too.
So have a good night. Be safe, and we'll talk
You
soon.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you.